Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Some people have a normal job, Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week, with health benefits, bonuses each year, retirement funds. Well, not me. I don't have a normal job. It's not easy doing what I do, but it pays the bills since I can't get a regular job due to my criminal record. I'm a janitor that works for the dark web, and I clean up murder rooms once the buyers are done torturing and killing the victims that they paid for. I've been doing it for the past 3 years, and every time someone needs help cleaning up the bloody mess they made, I go in and then clean up. I make sure that there is not a single drop of blood in the room and dispose of the leftover body parts any way that I could. No evidence remaining, no questions asked. In fact, I can never ask any questions. These people cannot be messed with. I just get paid to do my job and go home like nothing. It's a sick job, really, but they would pay me very good. But all of that would change one night when I started to finally question my morality. It was one night when they called me to do a job. It's always at the same location, which is 40 miles from where I live in a rundown warehouse. I was called to clean up a room, which really was no problem at all. But I noticed or barely caught on to something that I never thought twice about. As I was cleaning the room that was covered in blood, I saw a small picture on the floor. I picked it up, and it was a picture of a little girl, probably around 14 years old. This made me think right away that this was probably the victim whose blood I was cleaning up just now, and it gave me an uneasy feeling inside, and for the first time, kind of disturbed me. Just for the fact that these people are now using kids as their victims. But again, this was a job where no questions are asked, and I put the picture in my pants pocket and continued cleaning. Once I was done, I packed up my things and quickly got out of the warehouse. I went inside my car and instantly I got a call. It was them. They always call private, and I answered and they asked me if I was done cleaning up. I told them yes and that I had just gotten into my car. Then they told me that they left the money inside my glove compartment while I was inside cleaning, and they'll probably have another job for me in the next 2 days since they have a customer who's already waiting. I knew that I shouldn't have done this, but I decided to ask how old was she. Well, referring to the victim. They hanged up the call. I'm sure they were pissed just with me asking. I didn't know if I could continue doing this type of jobs anymore. But I didn't know how else I would get out of this without some possible threat to my life. I got the picture of the little girl and put it resting on the passenger side, and I went home that night contemplating everything. It was the next day at around 9 o'clock at night when I got a private call. I knew it was them and I was tempted not to answer, but I did anyway. They gave me the same location again and to be there at around 4 a.m. This time, no questions asked. Juan Miguel Santos of 3905 North 16th Street. Then the call hung up. This was a clear threat. Just do my job and get out of there, and I would need to leave town the next morning and disappear after this. I arrived at the location and saw that there was an old Grand Marquis parked outside. Usually, there wouldn't be any cars but mine at the location, and I got worried that maybe these people are keeping a close eye on me. I stepped outside my car and walked slowly inside, feeling more and more paranoid with each step that I took. The hallways were darker than before, and I saw light come from the room that I was supposed to go in. I entered inside, and my eyes couldn't believe what they had just seen. There was a girl in the middle of the room tied up and gagged to a chair, alive. The job wasn't done yet, but then I saw the body of a man laying right on the floor next to the girl that looked to be around 16 years old. The girl began to scream at me, and I started freaking out even more. I ran to the man on the floor and checked his pulse. He was gone. This was the man that was going to kill this girl, since I saw a scalpel on his right hand. I walked myself outside into the hallway and immediately got a call. Private, it was them. "Is everything okay?" They knew something was up. They also had cameras in the hallways, but not in the rooms, and they must have seen that I was nervous. Yes, everything's okay." "Finish the job and get out. We'll leave the money in your car." They hanged up, but I knew they knew something was wrong. I went back inside the room and the girl was yelling at me to help her with a gag in her mouth. I didn't know what to do, and I needed to dispose of her body. That meant that I needed to kill her first. I looked around inside the man's bag, and he had several weapons and tools inside, presumably to use to torture the girl. I pulled out a power drill and turned it on, and the girl started to scream even more, telling me to stop. She was crying her eyes out. I aimed the power drill at her face, and more tears started to run down her face, and I put the power drill down. I couldn't do it. I took off her gag and asked what had happened, and she told me that the man just fell on the floor and seemed like he had a heart attack. "You know that I can't let you out of here. These are dangerous people, and there are cameras everywhere inside this building." We both looked around the room. "What about him?" asked the girl. I looked at the man and saw he had a hoodie. I took it off and gave it to the girl. I said, "Put this on and cover yourself and run as far as you can away from here." "I'm scared. What if they find me?" the girl said. I looked inside the man's pockets and found some car keys. They must have been for the car that was parked outside. "Here, take these keys. I think the car that's parked outside belongs to him. But whatever you do not go to the police. They will find you and they will kill you. Just go as far away from here as possible." And before she left, I asked for her name and she said it was Crystal and that she was 17 years old. I was scared for her. I knew they might have even been outside waiting for me to finish. As soon as I was to take off, a car was approaching from behind me. The car parked right behind me and two men in masks stepped out. Not only that, but they had opened the back seat of the car and took out Crystal. They caught her. They knew everything we had done, and I should have taken off. One of the men took out a gun and pointed it at me to step outside of my vehicle. I stepped out, and they wanted for me to go inside. They took me and Crystal into the room with the client's dead body. I knew what they were going to do to us, and Crystal couldn't stop whining and moping. This is what happens when you try to be a hero. I needed to do something before we would be dead bodies right next to the one that's already on the floor, and I saw that Crystal was right beside the switch to the lights. And I looked at her and signaled my eyes to the switches to turn them off. The moment Crystal turned off the lights, I ran towards one of the masked men. Gunshots fired as the men were yelling to turn on the lights, and I grabbed the power drill that was on the floor and drilled it right into the man's chest. I stuck the drill all the way in, and I didn't stop till I heard the man gurgling and choking from his own blood. I got off of him and heard Crystal breathing hard and yelling. I turned on the lights and witnessed Crystal stabbing the other masked man repeatedly with a scalpel in his face. Half of his mask was gone from the punctures, and I got Crystal and then told her to stop. She was frightened, terrified. She hugged me tight and began to cry. Both of us had made it out alive this time. We walked over to my car and took off, both of us covered in blood. The sun was coming out, as it was already 6:30 in the morning. We both needed to change our identities, and I knew a guy who could do it, that I met from jail, and I drove over to his place right away. Sometimes, I do think that maybe it would have been better if both of us were dead, since we would now have to live in fear for the rest of our lives. Luckily, I haven't heard or seen of anything, but you never know. These people always manage to find you. Let's hope they don't catch me now, or for the rest of my life. So I'm a bit of a tech nerd by trade, at least I am nowadays. Back when I was much younger, I was a bit on the naive side. Well, okay, I was a bit stupid. Back then, I knew that the dark web was this magical place where all the illegal dealings on the internet happened, and I knew that the surface web had the boring stuff like social media, flash games, and the like. I wanted to see what else was out there, and I wanted to see what others hadn't seen, and as such, I started looking into and started figuring out how to do it. I have been on the dark web a couple of times, once when I was like 17, which is what this story is about, and a few times as I've gotten older, not to do anything illegal or make any sort of illegal purchase, but to see what I could get myself into without breaking the law. My first trip on the dark web, like I said, was quite a while ago. It was before Bitcoin became a big thing and before it had anywhere near the value it has now. I was just a kid and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. This one personal adventure with the dark web actually started with said cryptocurrency. Most things like Bitcoin and the alts came from the dark and deep web. They're not illegal to know about or own, but they were pretty much the go-to currency when it came to illegal dealings out there. Today, they're way more mainstream. I mean, you can literally buy them on a phone app. But back then, they had a little in ways of value or meaning. And while they were worthless in pretty much every practical sense, they were used for pretty much everything. You could use your Bitcoin to buy services, goods, and all of that. They were used for their anonymity more than anything really. And of course now, they actually have value, and people tout that they own Bitcoin. It's actually pretty crazy how much that's changed. Anyways, like I said, I had been talking to some of my high school friends and a couple guys that were older than me, and they mentioned Bitcoin. I had heard the term before, but I had no idea what they were or how the whole thing worked. Cutting a lot of the really boring parts of the story, I ended up getting Tor, working on my parents' desktop, and ended up on the deep web. It started here. I found a few pages where people were discussing random things, but really couldn't find any of the information that I wanted. These were pretty much your everyday deep web, just non-indexed pages where people would talk crap anonymously and then discuss their anti-government stances. From here, somehow I ended up on the dark web marketplace, one of those pages where you can seriously buy drugs, weapons, anything and everything that you could want, and that could easily land you in prison. Again, I wasn't looking to make a purchase. I was just looking for information, and I stumbled upon the user forum for this particular marketplace. Now, what I did was stupid, and I recommend, if you want information, you shouldn't go to the deep or dark web forum on a marketplace just to find it. But I got onto the forum and I literally posted a question. What is Bitcoin? I fluffed it up a little bit, saying that I had heard the term before and that I wanted to do a report on it for extra credit at my high school. This part was a lie, but I think part of me thought that I could get more honest info if I told them that I was a student and that I was just looking for research. Asking this kind of question is dumb. It's a good question to ask your buddies, your coworkers, people you know, or even Google. But it's a terrible question to blurt out on a forum littered with criminals and people that were quite knowledgeable about illegal activity. Doing this will attract one of two things. You'll either be laughed at and ridiculed or scammed. I attracted the latter. I got several comments and messages from people that told me that they would sell me their Bitcoin and all I needed to do was give them my credit card info. One person said that they would mail me some Bitcoin if I sent them money over PayPal. And there was even one guy that said if I gave him my address, he would hand deliver 1,000 Bitcoin to me for no cost. I may have been naive, but I wasn't this stupid. This was still the dark web, and I didn't fall for any of these posts. And thankfully, there was actually an admin that had taken pity on me. I actually remember his username too. Dark to Dust. He ended up deleting my post and messaged me with, "Are you a troll or an idiot?" I responded, and I explained to him that I was honestly a 17-year-old kid and that I needed information for a report. I told him that it was supposed to be for one of my finals and that I thought this would be a good place to ask. But he responded with, "Get off the dark web, kid. This is not the place for you. You need to leave, uninstall Tor, and never come back to this place ever again." And before I could respond again, he actually messaged me back and said, "Do you really need information?" And I told him I did. Then he sent me a small write-up on how the blockchain worked. He actually explained the basics of the algorithm for mining and how cryptocurrency existed, how while it was intangible, it did have value. He even went on to predict that it would have a real value in the near future, and he told me that I should consider an investment when I am older, but not right now. This guy went out of his way to actually educate me on it, how the system worked, and how to obtain Bitcoin. All this is well and good, and I really appreciated it, but it's how he finished off his message that makes this a terrifying story. When he finished his write-up, he added a postscript, and it said the following: P.S. Now that I've explained this to you, I want you to copy it, paste it in a document so you have it saved, and get off the dark web. If I ever see you back here, I will know it's you, Clark D. in West Virginia. I will personally come find you, and when I do, I'll take one of your kidneys as payment. They net a pretty penny out here on the market, and considering your age, I could probably get extra. Sound like a plan to you? You can probably piece together the situation. He knew my name, the state I lived in, and I was kind of in a place where I needed to take his threat seriously. So I responded one more time and just said yes sir, copied the info, and did what he told me. So all this said, I want to end this story by saying, thank you, Dark to Dust, if you're ever listening. Your advice was plentiful, and I understood the dangers of the dark web pretty quickly. I actually did take your advice and drop a bit of money into coins. It was a great investment, just like you've mentioned. And that said, I hope you and I never run into each other out there. This story isn't mine personally, and I'm not the type of person to go out on the deep web for any reason. This story actually happened to a coworker and a good friend of mine, and I made sure that he was okay with me submitting the story, and he said it was fine. For the sake of privacy and security, we're going to refer to him as Ron. Ron's a good guy, probably one of the nicest people I ever met, and he really didn't deserve the situation that happened to him. I will say that I've known him for a few years now, and I completely believe everything that is told me about this. Several years ago, Ron lived in a comfortable suburban home with his lovely wife of 10 years, and for the sake of security, we're going to call her Karen. Ron and Karen had a 7-year-old daughter at that time of this story, and everything seemed alright. Ron had a good job and made more money than they actually needed. Karen was a stay-at-home mom that took care of their daughter when she was at home, and then ran the various errands while she was at school, pretty much doing the basics of what a stay-at-home parent does. Ron was under the impression that their marriage was in a good position. He loved Karen as much as he always had, and he loved his daughter more than life itself. They had a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and they had enough money to take care of any financial emergencies if they needed it. To the best of Ron's knowledge, they were all happy and healthy, and he didn't think anything was wrong at home. Well, Karen, on the other hand, was apparently very unhappy with her marriage and was determined to leave Ron and run off with some guy that she had met online and had been talking to around a year. Karen and her internet boyfriend had apparently spent a lot of time plotting and spoke extensively how they could follow through on what they had planned and what would be the best way to get the deed done. At one time, they even discussed the possibility of her internet boyfriend driving from his home in Nebraska and doing it himself, saying that he could make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Apparently, this would have been too personal, and they opted to look on the dark web for someone to remove her husband from the equation. Then, she would wait long enough to bury him, collect insurance, and then pretend to grieve. Then after a few months, she planned to then take her daughter and the money from his life insurance and run off with her boyfriend to start a new life up north. Based on the conversations, she was adamant that it needed to look like an accident. That way, the life insurance would pay out the maximum. And like I said, Ron made good money and was worth a decent amount dead, so she planned to live a few years off of that with a new guy. Back to their actual plan, as I said, they had the intent of going on the dark web and finding basically a hitman to get rid of her husband. Apparently, they were successful to an extent. They got on the deep web, they found a site that listed people providing these services, and they got the information from someone that they were going to pay to do the entire thing. And they even went as far as sending the $15,000 to the account of the person that was supposed to do the job. Thankfully for Ron, his wife and her new boyfriend were not well versed in how things worked on the dark web, and to some extent were kind of stupid. Apparently, they went all the way through the plotting with this person, sent him the money, and even set a date. And on that date in question, Karen had taken their daughter to her grandparents' house and had told Ron that she was going to spend the day with them. And while she was gone, Ron got a visit by the local police and a federal agent. They explained the situation to him and basically took him into protective custody. When Karen got home, she expected to find her husband lying dead on the living room floor, but instead had federal agents screaming at her and taking her to the ground. What's worse, she apparently had brought their daughter home with her, meaning she would have been okay with the little girl seeing her dead father. Based on what Ron was told, the police had all the information on the conversation, connection logs, from when she was on the page, emails from her to the fake hitman, and enough evidence to put her away for a long time. Apparently, she was so desperate to get rid of him that she was able to be talked into sending the money over PayPal, and she literally sent $15,000 on a credit card over PayPal to have her husband murdered. I don't know if she was ignorant or if she just wanted it to be done and wasn't going to question the situation. Thankfully, for Ron's sake, she had gotten a hold of a sting on the site, and she was taken down without issue. The boyfriend was also arrested, and they were charged for conspiracy to commit murder and probably a few other charges. And they were both sentenced to 20 years in prison for their plans. Ron has since remarried, and his daughter is old enough to understand what her mother did. But he says that he got lucky with all of this, and I totally agree. If his wife had gone to another page, been a little more competent, and paid a little more attention to being secure in her messaging and communications, Ron may have been legitimately murdered that day, and she would be off living with her internet boyfriend in the Dakotas. And here are the top comments from my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.